Right. Okay, it's time. Let's get started. Badram Karanebihi Shunyama Devaha Badram Pashema Akshabihi Yajatraha Sthirairangair Tushtuam Sastanubihi Vyashema Devahitai Yadayuhu Swastinaha Indro Vridrashravaha Swastinaha Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinaha Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Brahaspati Dadatu यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रक्षुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वदाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाबोधं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good evening, everyone. So welcome to this very interesting workshop that the Hindu Knowledge Academy has organized for all of us. The title is Linking Science and Traditions and a very broad perspective on Om. So we carry on with our journey of the philosophy of Om, the Omkara Tattva, what it means, and so on. So I have dealt with, or I am trying to deal with the scriptural aspects of Om, but Om is just not restricted to philosophy and religion. It seems to be all pervasive in various fields. It is making its inroads into science, physics, biology, and so on. So what we thought for today is just take a slightly different angle to all this, and not as a distraction, but as a different perspective as to how do we look at Om. And in fact, this whole study of Omkara from other aspects is a classic example of Sanatana Dharma, where it has wide applicability not only in the physical sciences but also in biological and psychological sciences as well. And Om is a classic example of that. So before we jump into the main topic for today, I'm just putting on this slide, and I've said Simha Avalokana Nyaya. Okay. So what is a Simha Avalokana Nyaya? This is a very common theme in philosophy. So Simha, we all know, is a lion. Avalokana means it glances. So this lion, which is fearless in the jungle, when it walks through the jungle, or after it has hunted and it walks through the jungle, it walks through with such majesty that the first characteristic of a lion when it walks through the jungle is it is abhayam. It has no fear. It has no fear whatsoever about things that are around it. It just walks through the jungle fearlessly. So abhayam is the first concept that comes to us. And I just wanted to remind you that word abhayam comes in so many Upanishads. It defines the supreme being as abhayam. And it tells those who follow the supreme being, the philosophy of the supreme being also becomes abhayam. Now, this comes in Manduka Upanishad, it comes in Chandogya Upanishad, it comes in Taittiriya Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There's so many big Upanishads where this concept of Abhayam comes in. So, whenever I do the Simha Avalokana Nyaya, the concept of Abhayam comes in. So, what are we trying to do? We are trying to lead a life. So, eventually, we attain that state of Abhayam, because we know that the supreme being is with us all the time, and the supreme being is guiding us and helping us in our journey through life. And once we have that perception, we will never be fearful of all the events that happen around us. So that is the philosophy of the Abhayam. So on that related note, this Simha is looking back. And at the same time, in philosophy, what it also means is when you have studied a course, or when you have studied a particular concept for several weeks, you should always go back. You should always look back what you have studied as a revision. So that Simha Avalokana becomes very important. And what I wanted to do is, before I hand over the mic or the stage to others, I just wanted you to quickly recap all that we have done over the last 3 to 4 weeks. So we are doing Manduka Upanishad. We said Harihi Om. Om iti etadaksharam idam sarvam tasya upavyakyanam bhutabhavad bhavishyad iti sarvam omkara eva yacchanyat tadapi omkara eva sarvam hi etad brahma ayam atma brahma so ayam atma chatushpat. This is where we stop over the last 3 weeks, and we said, who is this Om? And I've just given it to you as a quick glance, like our lion. Look back and have a look at this. We said this Om is Akshara, or the Supreme Being. This Omkara gives us the concept of God and how do we understand him. We understood he can be known through the three Vedas and the related scriptures. And from the three Vedas and the related scriptures, we understood he is the abode of infinite auspicious attributes. He has no defects. And we said this Omkara indicates he is Jnananandamaya. This Omkara indicates he is omniscient and he is omnipotent. And we took the word Sarvaha. This Omkara is also called Sarvaha because that is the name of the Supreme. And when we hear about Sarvam in the Upanishads, the understanding of the Supreme that should come to us is he is omnipresent. He is everywhere. When I say he is everywhere, what does it mean? He is in everything at all times and in all places. So all those three concepts again come in Omkara. Then we said this Omkara guy is also called Brahman. And what is Brahman? He that pervades the Brahmanda is Brahman. Then we said such a Brahman creates what? He creates this universe, he maintains this universe, and he destroys this universe. And the same Brahman, what does he do? He gets inside your Jiva as your Antaryami. In the Pindanda, he is called the Atman, or the Atma of the Upanishads. So this is all how our Varuna is actually contemplating on the Brahman. So we left last week talking about how this Paramatman is inside the Jivatma and controlling all the things that this Jivatma is doing in its transactions in this life. And what are all the transactions? What are the activities of this Atma, of this Jivatman during his course, during his journey, not only in mundane existence, but also in liberation. What does this Jiva do, and how does that Paramatman sitting inside him control? So that is the next section of the Mandukya Upanishad, or the Manduko Upanishad, that talks about the various states of consciousness. So we are going to be dealing with that in about 2 weeks' time. So, but this Simha Avalokana Nyaya, this Simha Avalokana, I hope, gives you this concept of Omkara. But then, having said that, is this Omkara just belongs only to the Sanatana Dharma? Is this a very sectarian concept of Sanatana Dharma? Absolutely not. Our Upanishads resoundingly claim Eko Devaha. There is only one supreme being, and that supreme being is for all of us, not just for the Hindus, but for every traditions and every religions of the world. There is only one supreme being, like how the Shvetashvatara Upanishad says. It's one of those very famous Upanishad saying, which is Eko Devaha, Sarva Bhuteshu Gudaha, Sarva Vyapi, Sarva Bhutantaratma, Sakshi, Cheto, Kevalo, Nirgunashcha. So it goes on and celebrates the Supreme. So Eko Devaha is the concept there. And this Omkara is applicable across all faiths, because once you understand the concept, what Omkara signifies, there is no problem. So on that related ground, I'm going to pass on the stage to Sudarshan, who is going to talk to us about Om in other traditions. It's not necessarily in Sanatana Dharma, but it's in all other traditions that have evolved from Bharatvarsha. So Sudarshan.
Madhu, what about the slides? You will be changing? There's not many
Yeah,
slides.
just indicate, I'll change for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Madhu. What it is, the Om is there in all the other traditions from the India. You need to understand that the Indian traditions are very much similar. Whether it's just switch off. Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, or Sikhism, it's all very similar. And just now I've been sort of we have been talking about with somebody else a couple of hours ago. Many of the text in the Western text, they find it very difficult to understand, and sometimes some of them they do it very deliberately. They confuse others, and they give less importance to Hinduism, and they sort of promote Buddhism. They promote other religions, and within the Indian context for some ulterior political motives as well. But the main issue is we all know, like even the word Hinduism is wrong. We say Sanatana Dharma. everything originated in Sanatana Dharma. All the concepts are very much interrelated. They have like a complete overlap, and there is no, sometimes you feel like there's no need to even separate them actually into separate like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. It's all Sanatana Dharma anyway. So you'll probably understand in that context there are many things like that which is overlapping in this, but it's just about the Om we are talking today. Om is there in my talk is not very big anyway, so there's a lot of plenty of other talk today about the Om, and very sort of many people are going to talk about the scientific aspects as well. Madhu, next slide please. Well, in Tibetan Buddhism, they use Om at the beginning of all the mantras. I mean, all of you would have been very familiar with this Om Mani Padme Hum, which is a traditional sort of Buddhist chanting. And that sort of, it starts with Om, and many of the mantras, even there is, I mean, I could not put it here. Even in the Chinese language, the Om is there. Actually, there is a symbol for Om, and so it's quite common. Even the Om symbol has gone to the outside the Indian subcontinent to wherever the Buddhism has gone. Next one please, Madhu. Yeah, in Jainism as well, which is a offshoot from Hinduism anyway, and all these sort of five parameshwari, Arihanta, Ashir, Acharya, Upadhyaya, Nanis, they all sort of it is regarded as a condensed form of all those things, and maybe we'll talk a bit more when we talk about Jainism another day. Next one, Madhu. In Sikh prayers, the Moola mantra is Ek Onkar, and that also, like, Onkar is Omkar. Onkar comes from the Omkara, so it is the root basis of all the Sikh scriptures, and it is the first phrase of the Guru Granth Sahib as well. And yeah, as I said, the Omkar Punjabi word comes from Omkara, so it is very much common in Sikhism as well. I think so. That's all, Madhu. My slides are. Madhu, are you there?
Yeah. So thank you, Sudarshan. So there was a rapid fire round from the various religions and dharmas that come out from India, and how Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism also use Omkara as one of their foundational concepts. So Sudarshan, thank you very much for that presentation about the three other main religions or traditions that come out from India that get inspiration from Omkara. So we are going to take a slightly different direction now. So now, having understood, and you guys can do your own studies and research. There is plenty of material, as Sudarshan pointed out, that is available online and elsewhere, talking about how the Omkara is all pervasive in other traditions. So that is the traditional aspects, the philosophical aspects. Now what we do is we take a slightly different angle to it, because there is this concept of Om. People usually link it with consciousness and the awareness of the self, the awareness of the universe around us, and how to link that consciousness and Om, how the philosophy of Om actually give us an insight into the science of consciousness. So that is what Mohan Pandey from India is going to talk to us today. Mohan, thank you very much for joining us today. So the stage is yours. Mohan's title is Science is Trying to Unlock the Knowledge of Consciousness. Can Om be the key? I very much look forward to your presentation, Mohan. So go for it.
Thanks, Madhuji. Am I audible? Okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
Thank you. So the perspective I am going to share today is really from the perspective that when we chant Om, we have a particular vibration that it leads to. And as we know in physics, we have half of the physics, at least if not everything, deals with frequencies and vibrations. And we also have now understanding of how those things are actually linked to physics, links to chemistry, chemistry links to biology. And then our entire being actually can be traced down to vibrations. So that's the context in which I will talk about this particular concept. And they are some of these things which are pretty new in science. In fact, the hypothesis or hypothesis, which is orchestrated objective reduction, is just about 25 year old, and a lot of research is happening in this area now. So I'll take you briefly through that, and hopefully by end of the presentation you will see that what we recognize as a simple chanting, how it may actually deeply influence many things. And then the idea is to present it in a way that we can have some testable experiments if we choose to, and if right people get involved, we can actually create it in a modern scientific way. I mean, it's all been scientific in our Sanatan tradition. It was all very scientific, but that science was done in a slightly different way. Modern science is done practiced slightly differently. So the idea is that can we replicate some of our knowledge in a modern scientific method as well. Whereas I don't consider it necessary. I also don't think it will achieve something beyond what we are otherwise achieving or have achieved, because whatever we will do through this modern science will still be material. And what we have been dealing in this forum is about non-material, which is beyond, right? So even if we achieve something from this method, it will still be material. And nevertheless, so with all that constraint, I will talk about. So first part of this is Shabd, Om itself. So for example, when I chant it, I mean, it's just Anubhav, right? Anubhuti. So everybody has to do it for themselves. So when I chant, for example, I say, now, and then when I am repeating it obviously I experience that it's leading to certain kind of vibration internally. And when I am able to channelize it, then I can see that at different parts of body there is different type of vibration. We can titrate it, modulate it, change the frequencies. So a variety of things can be done. It's a matter of practice. The question now is part two of that is that when we do that, now there is a lot of research that tells us that it impacts certain parts of brain, and there are other presenters talking about that, so I won't go in detail, but the hypothesis in short is that when we do chanting, it leads to a particular brain network. And somebody could argue that any chanting would lead to some brain network. Yes, it will, but people have done nice experiments in terms of having a religious chanting. For example, the particular study that I have quoted here, they did it with Buddhist followers, and they, for example, meditated on Buddha Amitabh. As against that, if you pick, for example, Santa Claus, so they did that in a very controlled way. And for this Buddhist practitioner, Santa Claus is not a religious thing. So it activated completely different parts of brain. And Buddha Amitabh, that activated different part of brain. Similarly, Professor Gangadhar at NIMHANS here in Bangalore, actually, he studied, he said like, you do Om, and then he said like control voice like sss. So there are two different sounds. You are repeating, chanting everything, but he could clearly show that they are impacting different parts of brain. So the fact that a particular type of vibration links to a different type of brain network is no more a hypothesis. Now we know that that's what happens. After that is when extremely interesting piece comes, that all this while we thought that, okay, brain networks, we know that our neural system is composed of neurons, and neurons, as you know, there is the synapses that form between two neurons, right? So the dendrites and that those synaptic networks that form, they are in like billions of numbers. So we have billions of neurons and these billion of synapses. So there has been in last 50, 60 years a kind of hypothesis, integrated information theory, which is saying that when a lot of these synaptic networks form, consciousness emerges. And the word emergence is important. For example, they say, you look at ice, you start increasing the temperature. At some point of time, the waterness emerges from ice. And if there is water, you start lowering the temperature. Suddenly at a point, iceness emerges, right? And they take that same metaphor forward, and then they say that at some point of time when you have lots of neurons, then consciousness emerges. And obviously, therefore, in that theory, consciousness is dependent on brain. So it's brain, and then there is lower and higher order of consciousness. So if you have less number of neurons, you have lower order of consciousness. If you have more neurons, then there is higher order of consciousness. So on and so forth. Now there is this alternative theory talking about that possibly is not true, and they say that while you could argue that at some point of complexity in the network some property will emerge, what they say is that the order of consciousness is not really explained by that. So this the third part of it is coming from Hammeroff Penrose. Penrose, by the way, he got Nobel Prize this year for some of his research that helped us decode some secrets of black hole. He was the one to extend Einstein's theory further. He collaborated with Stephen Hawking. So folks who are in UK, pretty much in your neighborhood, lot of exciting thing happening. And he has collaborated with this anesthesiologist Hammeroff, Stuart Hammeroff, and come out with this theory. So I'll touch a little bit more on that. So what they talk about is that it's not those networks, but it is about a certain vibration that is achieved in dendrons, specifically microtubules in the dendrites. That is the seat of consciousness. And then that leads to point 4, that if all of this leads to consciousness, then from our Sanatan philosophy perspective, we don't leave consciousness as consciousness, right? We have orders of consciousness. There is waking state, and then there is a dream state, then there is deep sleep, then there is turiya. In current modern science, medical science, if you see, there also there is categorization of consciousness. There is awake, and then there is sleep. So there is a message that someone is not able to hear. Am I audible to others?
We can more. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you are.
So there also there is, and from medically we know there is coma, and then there is brain dead state, and then there is death. So there are different levels of consciousness defined, and maybe there are some similarities, and compare and contrast, and we can explore. So that basically is the hypothesis here. So let's move to next slide, please. Madhuji, yeah, thank you. Now, here what you see is the study that I was referring to, that if you look at Om chanting compared to rest, it is impacting different parts of brain, and there is even more detailed presentation later on, so I will not much elaborate on this. Maybe we move forward. Madhu, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So this slide particularly, along with some other references that we have now in chanting, religious versus non-religious, relevant, non-relevant sounds. And they did actually another phenomenal thing. What they said is that while chanting, you are now exposed to some different types of images. So like some horrible images they will show, some gory images, and then they will try to see people who are having religious chanting, how do they react to those disturbing visuals, versus people who are having religious chanting, how their brain reacts to those disturbing visuals. And people who are actually in religious chanting, they are able to uh, be very neutral to those disturbing images, well as otherwise people are reacting to that. Their brain is actually reacting to it, which they obviously capture through fMRI. And therefore they are able to classify various parts of brain in different zones, and conclude actually that there is a particular brain network which is related to religious chanting. They have Buddha Amitav was the meditation point here. Previous slide that you saw was Om. So it's kind of pointing towards similar direction, although I didn't do the study of seeing whether these both studies found same regions in the brain as overlapping or not. I think we can look at that. Some experts can look at that rather than me doing it. So moving on to next slide. This has been very interesting finding, because we know these anesthetics have been there for almost 150 plus years now, and we know that anesthetics actually work. So people can get through an operation. There is no pain felt, at least as during the procedure while the anesthesia lasts. Different gases of different types of structures actually cause anesthesia, others don't. And again, for different gases, there are different concentration at which they cause. So some are more potent, some are less potent, and so on and so forth. So what this hammer of anesthesiologist, he looked into this particular microtubules region in the pyramidal neurons. And if you see here, this particular structure, it's actually a protein structure, a tube made of protein. And within that, it's like a cheese slices getting aligned in a particular form, and you get the tubulin pathways. So what he has shown here, and if you see that this curve here on the right side, is that how different gases actually lead to a certain frequency shift when they are causing that anesthesia, when that frequency shift is now measured, not in terms of how the tube is vibrating, but actually what happens here is there is a certain kind of a bond formation that's happening. If you recall from our chemistry lessons that if you look at two hydrogen atoms, they come together to form hydrogen molecule, right? So one hydrogen has an electron in its orbit, another has another one. But when they form the molecule, these electrons actually then form a cloud. So there is one cloud in which there are two electrons, so to say. And that particular cloud has a particular frequency, and that's the frequency that's being talked about here. So that is pi resonance oscillation is actually in terahertz frequency, like very high. And as you see, very interestingly, if you go from this to left, how this keeps reducing. And when we look at EEG, for example, it's of order of magnitude of 1 to 10 frequency, and that keeps going log order high as we go towards these electrons which are in a quantum coherent state. So basically what this hypothesis is saying, that these particular gases are going and creating a particular quantum state, and that is what is leading to anesthesia. And the counterpoint will be that absence of that is keeping those electrons in another type of quantum entangled state, is what actually leading to consciousness. And that's a phenomenal amount of advance in science, I would say. expected that in next 3 to 10 years, we will be able to understand this much better. But while we are doing that, the point is that if we look at this structure here, previous one, please, just the previous one. Here, these frequencies, when we are doing the chanting of Om, we are creating a type of frequency. And the point is that if this frequency has a correlate to this type of frequency, the reverse ought to be true as well. And therefore, what we have seen is that Om has created a particular frequency. It leads to particular brain network. It impacts the tubulin in a certain way, and then that leads to certain kind of vibration leading to consciousness. So that's really the hypothesis. Next slide, please. Now, this study is where there are correlates with different levels of consciousness, and this is where the difference comes between integrated information theory and why orchestrated objective reduction theory might be better suited to study this. This slide talks about looking at different populations, so people who are in awake state, people who are in sleep, people who are in coma state, and they have mapped this. So these diagrams that you see, the heat map here, it basically shows on leftmost side awake state to rightmost side somebody who is in coma, and you see that different brain regions are affected differently. And this type of thing will not happen because the basic thing is that your all synapses are still maintained even when somebody is in coma, right? And all the billions of neurons are still there. So despite everything else being present, everything else working perfectly fine, we still have different levels of consciousness in this metric. And there may be a way to probe this further and see if we can have exploration of a state of Turiya, because arguably Turiya will be something not just coma, it must be something beyond that, more subtle. That leads to next slide. I would just summarize in interest of time. That now we know that Om vibration is linked to certain part of brain network. We also know that how quantum entanglement in microtubules may have role in consciousness. So is it now a ripe time to actually design a well-controlled study and answer the question that does Om actually directly relate to Turiya, and frame that study. Now, next stage obviously will be, this is a very learned audience. The idea will be to brainstorm, get right type of people on board, and create a panel of people who can actually explore this. So that's a humble submission here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mohanji. That was quite interesting. I just wanted to finish off with your last line. Brainstorm a quick study with a pilot cohort. So you got 20 here. Today there are 23. So I'm sure you will be able to find a pilot cohort to do this analysis. But I have to say, that this is quite an amazing new science that's coming out, and I won't be surprised within the next few years the studies of meditation and chanting and everything will probably be fed into these kind of basic protocols and methodologies that are now available in neuroimaging and so on, to try and understand this. Very fascinating concept. Your suggestion about Turiya as possibly as that one of those states that you're describing is interesting. So I think what we will do, Mohan, is, if it's okay and if you are able to join until the end of the session, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So I would request all the panel members to be available, so that if there are any Q&As that are going to come through, so that you individually can address some of those questions. And can I also request for those of you who are there to make notes of certain questions? You can also send it through the chat link within Zoom, but please do make a note of questions, and then we can actually ask, challenge, and also in the process learn from our esteemed speakers today. Okay, so on that note, Mohan, thank you very much for coming along today. So we move on to a related perspective. So this is from Nandesh, who is going to give more a perspective from physics. So we have heard from quantum, I'm already brainstormed here. I'm just a physician, so we keep very simple concepts in our working. But the previous talk was amazing. So, and I'm sure Nandesh is going to lead on to that. It's a related area about physics and how Om can actually fit into that. Nandesh.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Madhu. Yeah. If I can go to the next slide. Yeah. Yeah. I think I was listening with fascination with Mohan Pandeyji's talk, and I think in a way I'm probably going to reinforce what the hypothesis he presented, because I've got actually very similar things, and I'll just touch upon, maybe this will go into a little more basics, which will just substantiate the hypothesis and things which he put forward. So hopefully it will be helpful in that sense. So, yeah, I think I won't touch upon the spiritual side, but as we know, it's the source. It's again, I'll be coming back to this concept of vibration and consciousness of the entire universe. I think Om, if I go through the basics, in regards, how it connects, all the different states, so as Mohanji said, in regards when we are chanting Om, the art of the first part, it actually activates the connection between the body and the mind, and then it actually goes, progressively into the other states, and eventually reaching the Turiya state, in the super consciousness or absolute or pure consciousness. So it is, in a way, the way I see it is a tool. So you could see it akin to sort of, considering Om as the bow, which helps the arrow, which is sort of, the soul, to reach its target, which could be the Brahman. So it's a very powerful tool, and again, it's coming down to all the basics. If I go to the next slide, Madhu. Yeah. So from a physics perspective, so as physics, again, I think I've got different views of things starts with mathematics, and then they go to physics, and then applied physics can help in regards to understanding chemistry, which then goes to biology, psychology, and philosophy. But what basically the fundamental science of physics is concerned with is the nature and properties of matter and energy. And I think Om transcends, both these matter and energy principles, and it is a sound wave which creates a certain frequency, vibration, and they've done this, and they measured the frequency as being about 432 hertz. In regards where it stands in the sound wave spectrum, if you like, and because I was trying to conceptualize, the low frequency sound waves, they are 500 hertz and lower. So it sits in that frequency. The medium frequency are between 500 and 2000, and the high frequency about 2000. And I think our human ears can hear from very, very low frequency from about 20 hertz onwards. And that's, again, it's coming back to the vibration, the frequency of things. And there's also news of panpsychic philosophy at the moment, which is talking about consciousness and vibration. Just like like we have other fundamental aspects. When we try to understand something in physics, we take it for granted, some of the fundamental laws which are to do with space, time, and mass. And there's a new sort of philosophy which says, okay, I think should we be including vibration and consciousness as one of the fundamental laws, because that, based on also all the hypotheses which Mohanji produced, is also quite fundamental to understanding the whole consciousness matter. So going to the next slide. Madhu, yeah. So it's all about vibrations again. So I'm coming back to that same sort of concept. It's all about vibrations, and I think our original languages, they probably evolved as onomatopoeia. So it isn't like when we say boom, it's actually just trying to sort of have sounds which evoke movements of energy, and everything has an energy all around the universe. The earth, I mean, Schumann, he actually did some experiments and all, and then the earth behaves, it's got its own electromagnetic field, and they found actually it's got a natural frequency of 7.83 hertz. And if you see this figure here, so which talks about all the different frequencies, and you can see, so there's 432 hertz, and it says it's DNA healing chakra cleansing meditation, and There's also chakra throat meditation. So there are all these different frequencies which are supposed to be helping in achieving all these different things. So I mean, we think actually like, you know, Madhu is a big, you know, so he's done so much work in CRISPR-Cas9, Madhu. So which does all the molecular Caesar and does all the gene editing. Looks like actually by playing with frequencies, we can do the gene, the DNA healing as well. So it's all about vibrations. Going to next slide, Madhu. This is something which, you know, so we are currently working, you know, so on. So this is a new project which we're working on. It's to do with quantum dots, and I thought I'll just explain this concept, you know, in very basic terms, to again put forward an argument in regards how matching frequency can help us to grow. So this is we are doing it as part of Innovate UK project, and so basically imagine a natural glass, you know, and we have actually light shining on this glass, and glass is basically a packet of photons, you know. So the normal glass, when this packet of photons comes in, you have a little bit of energy absorbed by the glass. A lot of it will come through the glass. Some will get reflected. Now we've done some experiments by coating this glass with quantum dots, you know, which are basically nanoparticles, you know, something like 5 to 10 nanometers in size. So the idea is that when we coat this, what we found is that the light packet of photons coming in, these nanoparticles have got electrons, have the frequency which matches with the photons in the light. And what we've seen is, so when light passes through, very little goes through, a lot of it is absorbed in the glass. And we've seen it by different experiments, you know, so where, you know, say traditionally, if in glass, it will take water to heat from say 0 to 90 or 100 degrees in, you know, 2 or 3 hours. This, using quantum dots, what we've seen actually, it reduces the time by a quarter. So it's got huge practical applications, which I won't go into the details. But what I'm trying to get to the concept is that if you match the frequencies, you know, it will help. It will allow energy sharing. It will allow energy transfer. So that's the concept which I want to. So again, with Om chanting, if you match the frequency with that, then it will have a lot of benefits. It's like actually tuning ourselves to a radio station. So if you want to hear, say, Radio 4, you tune it to 93.7. So if you're trying to tune something, then you hear it and you enjoy the benefits. So if you want to enjoy the benefits, then you need to tune to that. Next slide, please, Madhu. So just to summarize, of, you know, in regards, it's about synchronized vibrations. So if we can tune, you know, by chanting Om, then we open ourselves to the vibration of all. You feel grounded into the cosmos, and it's a tool for spontaneous, you know, self-organization. And as I think Devalji and others will actually talk about it, you know, how it helps physiologically, psychologically, and it affects both sides of the brain. And as Nicholas Tesla, who also was a big, you know, so who believed in the Vedas and the Upanishads, he said, if you wish to understand the universe, think of frequency and vibration. And I would say, sort of, you know, in a very so humble, unassuming way, is that if you want to understand the universe, we need to understand Om and all these its aspects. Yeah, thank you, Madhu.
Wonderful, Nandesh. Thank you very much for that. Taking us through some ideas about quantum physics and synchronization, vibrations, and how you know, Ohm frequency, and how that synchronization and resonance can actually make a positive effect. And there's lots of research on that. I just wanted to insert an interesting thought here. The concept of quantum physics and quantum mechanics is not unknown to the Upanishads. True. So in Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, there is a description of tanne jati, and so on. So it is there not. It moves not. And you know, those kind of quantum concepts are quite commonly used by our rishis. So clearly that deep meditation and those frequencies seems to bring some unknown knowledge, and that is what revelation is all about, is to bring in those hitherto unknown knowledges. So it all makes a lot of sense. So Nandesh, thank you very much. And so we've had a very interesting glimpse into the physical aspects from Nandesh, and we've heard from Mohanji about consciousness. So we're going to have, so yes, understanding the physical universe and the physical science is good, But unless as we as humans who have actually got the sadhana sharira, so this body is with us and we need to make good use of it. So the question there is, how do you use this human body in that direction around Om and consciousness and all the greatness that it has to offer to us? So we go more into the biological aspects of this. So I'm going to invite Devalji to give us a talk on that. Deval, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Madhu, for giving me this opportunity to talk. So as the title says, I'm going to be speaking on Om and sort of basic biology. So like Nandesh was saying, we've done the physics, sort of touched the vibrations and the world, and I'm coming back to the Pindanda or the body now. And I'm going to just discuss one paper, one journal article, but as you can see, it's a summary paper. So I hope you find that interesting. So the next, yeah. So just to pause here and take a little recap and think about what we are trying to study here. So we are in Mandukya Upanishad, and we are here together to contemplate on very complex issues which a lot of people have spent their lifetime studying. And the four, I mean, obviously I don't know much about what is in the Upanishads, but what I can gather is that it deals with four concepts. The first one being consciousness, which I think simplest definition of it is awareness of internal and external existence. Being asleep and being awake, the sound of Om and its effect on the body and the mind. So that's what we are trying to do here today. Next slide, please. So the next few slides are just, I know most of us are a medical audience over here, but I still thought that I'll sort of summarize the brain basics. So brain is a huge and a complex organ in the human mind, in the human body. It has 100 billion nerves that communicate in trillions of connections called synapses. And it requires both chemical action and electrical activity to occur for its functioning. So we've talked about vibration, but actually the neurons also talk to each other by the different chemicals and electrical activity. And trying to study an organ, we try to think about the structure of the organ, which is what are the different parts of the brain, how they sit with each other, and what do they look like, and the function of the brain, which is what are these different parts there to do, and why do they exist, and what is the purpose of the purpose that they serve. The next slide, please. Sorry, the previous one. Yeah. So I just wanted to, so the figure on the right, I wanted people to focus, and I just wanted to make a couple of points. So we have in these talks talked about evolution. We all know about how human brain is highly evolved compared to some of the other mammals and other living organisms. So the key thing that I wanted to say is the blue bit, which you can see is huge in a human brain compared to a shark brain. That's it's the new evolutionary new brain, and has the cortex, and especially the prefrontal cortex, which I'll just come to in a bit. But the second bit about this picture is all those little colorful pictures which you can see in the shark brain. They form the primitive brain, which regulates emotions and motivated behaviors. And the important bit is the human brain has all those parts as well, and they serve more or less the same function. So next slide, please. So the old bit of the brain and the evolved bit of the brain together form what is called as the limbic system. And it sort of combines the higher mental functions and primitive emotion into one system. Its importance is on forming new memories from past experiences, emotional reactivity, regulating aggressive behavior, and have rule-based and habit learning. Next slide, please. Yeah, just a couple of slides because we're talking about consciousness. I thought I'll just do a little bit about sleep. Well, all brains, I think, need sleep as opposed to other organs. Like say, for example, your heart, which just beats 24/7. Humans spend 1/3 of their lives asleep. We all know that there are two types of sleep, which is deep sleep and dream sleep. And there's different activities, electrical activity going on different stages of the sleep. And I think then another key point is that the process that promotes sleep and the interactions mechanisms are different to that maintains wakefulness. Next slide. And our body is different, and the physiology is different in different parts of the sleep. So you can't see it here, but your respiration, blood pressure, heart rate is different in non-REM sleep as compared to REM sleep. Next slide. So how does one study how our brain functions? We can't just take bits of brain and put them under a microscope. So we study through inference, and there is a huge advances made in how we do this. And I've just listed some of the common ways in which we study, and because these are the ones that will come up in the journal article that I'm just going to discuss. So everybody knows about MRI scans. So you put your brain in a scanner and try to look at what bits of the brain light up when there is a change in blood flow to a stimulus. For example, if you see something or you hear something. There is a functional infrared spectroscopy looks at oxygen carrying capacity on the brain. EEG studies electrical activity on the brain. The fourth one is interesting. It's about auditory evoked potentials. So for example, a sound which occurs external in the environment has to be perceived by the brain, and there is a latency. So there is a time lag for the sound to occur, sound waves to travel, and the brain to recognize it. I mean, we're still talking 20 milliseconds here, so it's very quick, but there are studies that study this. And the last one, one of the study talks about is a galvanic skin response. That's an electrical activity that goes on the skin of one's body. Yeah, so the journal is in psychological thought. It's a psychology journal, and it's a theoretical analysis and a compilation of a survey. So it's not a systematic analysis. What the authors have tried to do is to look at papers between 1994 and 2017. And they have looked at papers that study OM meditation, its effect on the human body, and OM meditation as a tool for stress management. Obviously, the authors are Bhavna et al. And what I found interesting is, even though it's published in a psychological journal, it's done by Department of Electronics, two departments, one in Shegao and other in Pune in Maharashtra, India. Next slide, please. So just to recap, it's studying OM, meditation, and stress. So I don't need to discuss this. We know what we're talking about when we're saying Om as a sacred sound and a spiritual symbol in Indian religions. Next slide. And just a recap about what stress and medication definitions are. So stress is defined as body's reaction to threat. It could be either real or perceived, and it sets when one feels threatened, it your body sets a reaction of chemicals, and the body reacts in with a stress response where your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, blood pressure rises, and the body prepares to fight or flight. And meditation is defined as a practice where individual uses a technique such as mindfulness or focusing the mind on a particular object, thought, or an activity. And so it's training your brain for attention and awareness. And it comes from dhyana in Hinduism and the root word dhyai. Sorry, next slide. Yeah. So the survey focuses on, so the various studies focuses on 4 different techniques which are used to study Om meditation. So the first one are the studies that use neuroimaging methods. The second one is based on EEG methods. The third is the middle latency response, and then the other methods. So that's how the authors have sort of classified them. I know the next few slides will, yeah, you can put on the next slide, are quite busy, but I'll try and focus on the important findings because I think this is the key bit of the journal article. So they found 4 studies which using neuroimaging techniques, 2 which uses functional MRI, and two that use the infrared spectroscopy. So in the first one, 20 teenagers were taken. There was loud Om chanting, and they were exposed to mobile phones for 30 minutes. And the Om chanting was done for 5 minutes. And what they found is there was a deactivation of the prefrontal cortex, which is the new, new brain linked with intelligence. And also stimulating effect of the auditory branch of the vagus nerve, which is used in hearing. The second paper has 21 male subjects who are listening to the Om sound. And then they've done fMRIs while they were listening for 12 minutes. They were listening to a sound called Am for 12 minutes. Sometimes they were not listening to any sound. And sometimes they were listening to a sound called Tom for 12 minutes and sort of repeat patterns of these. And they found that the most areas of the brain that were sort of activated were those that were for emotional empathy. And it also implicates that there is a phonological processing when Om was being chanted as opposed to no sound or Tom was being chanted. So there is a differential in different sounds. The third article, again, uses infrared on 22 males. This is mental Om meditation, and they found that oxygen levels were increased in the prefrontal cortex during the Om meditation. And the last article, again, it's a functional MRI scan, which Mohanji just mentioned, comparing rest sounds to Om sounds and rest sounds to sound for 15 seconds. And they found significant deactivation of the limbic bits of the brain and the orbitofrontal cortex, and suggesting that's why that it can be used for treatment in depression and epilepsy. So next slide. So the second paper, there was only one paper that studies the EEG method, which I found quite surprising because there is actually very clear differences in the wavelength patterns. But they only found one paper, which was by the same authors, of loud Om mantra chanting with rest Om chanting and rest. And they found that chanting reduces the complexity of the EEG signal and feeling of calmness. The complexity decreases as the sleep becomes deep. So that is the significance of this finding. Next slide. So there were 3 papers on Om meditation and the middle latency response. So just to remind you, this is the time from an external stimulus which is perceived in the brain. They're all done by the same authors, but at different times. And I think the key differences is in the first one, it says that if you are a practiced meditator, these are all mental Om meditation. But if you are a practice in meditation, then you need less effort. The brain needs less effort than if you are naive to meditate. The second one compares Om meditation to non-targeted thinking, and they found that it reduces heart rate if you are chanting Om. And the third study was, it's comparing mental Om meditation to neutral thinking and repeating a word which is called Khom, which is a random word. And they found that heart rate, skin resistance, and respiratory rate reduced. Next slide. And the fourth finding was about Om meditation sound and other methods. The authors found 2 articles. One was loud Om chanting and prayer, and they found that there was an increase in the skin resistance effect, which suggests a psychophysiological relaxation. And the other article, which I don't particularly know what this is, a wavelet analysis of speech signal, but it was something about the sound in which Om is chanted and processed. And they found that Om chanting affords steadiness in mind, calm and peace to the stressed mind. And next slide, please. Yes, sorry, this is not a new finding. It's just a summary that there are 3 studies out of all these studies which compare Om sound to chanting some other sound. In the first one, it was 1. In the second one, it was Tom. And third one, it was comparing to the sound, which all have found Om more effective than any other sound. Next slide, please. So to summarize, I think meditation in yoga has already been known to have positive effects on physical and mental well-being. And Om mantra chanting, which is simple and easy to practice, would also come under the classification of meditation. It seems that it does not only affects various parts of the brain, especially the limbic system, but it also affects, there are healing effects to Om meditation. And they justify their journal by saying that they have includes a large number of papers which have been done recently, and a lot of different ways of trying to find the effects. And as usual, it ends with more research is needed. And the authors themselves also state that maybe EEG should be used a bit more. So I hope you find that interesting. I know it was a lot to take in, but yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Shri Krishna Paramastu.
So Deval, I think this was a wonderful talk, actually, to give a comprehensive summary and review of what the mental psychiatric connect brain and OM is. You know, most of us have heard, oh yeah, OM reduces stress and so on. But thank you very much for actually providing the data for us so that we can go back and look at this as well. The references are out there for others in the audience. So and read about it and convince yourself. So when our rishis have given so much importance to Om, it's not because they like it, but actually it makes a lot of physical sense, mental sense, physiological sense to do it. Now, as we are embarking on this journey today from the abstract concept of consciousness to the physics of consciousness to the psychiatric aspects of consciousness, I just wanted to take time and remind our audience today about the caliber of the speakers that we have today. Our first speaker was from pharmaceutical sciences. The second speaker is an expert in chemical engineering, and he's a scientist himself. The third speaker, whom we have just heard, is a psychiatrist in the UK. Now we are going to have the fourth speaker, who is a neuroradiologist. So she is a radiologist, and she is going to give us an insight into the brain imaging and some new concepts. So we have summarized and we have understood all that exists out there. But what Shalini ji is going to do us is she's going to take us to a completely new sphere. So Shalini, I have to say, I had no idea what glymphatics is. So I'm really looking forward to understand about glymphatics and the neuroradiology of it. So Shalini, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is just a new perspective on how to see meditation and its potential impact on CSF dynamics. For people who are non-medics, I'd like to say the cerebrospinal fluid is a fluid that circulates around the brain, and it was discovered a long time ago in 1926 when they first discovered that there was a third circulation in addition to the arterial and venous circulation that we're all aware of. But since then, there's lots of research on how the CSF works, and currently we have understood certain things about CSF flow, and we know that CSF flow around the brain is influenced by cardiac pulsations, respiration, posture and gravity, sleep, and also on the neuronal activity, and lots of things that we still don't know about. So the Om chanting and meditation has some impact on the CSF flow, and it's just what I see from how it behaves. The CSF flow has potential impact on the glymphatic system as well. So next slide, please, Madhu. So in the interest of time, I don't want to go into very much details about how this works, but CSF flow for a long time has been thought to be affected predominantly by cardiac cycle. So when the cardiac beats, the arterial pulsations affect the CSF flow. But recently, not so long ago, it has been shown that the inspiration is a major regulator of CSF flow. So the reason why that is important is as we concentrate on meditation and Om chanting, we regulate our breathing, and then the inspiration has an impact on how the CSF flows. I'll come back to this and tie this all together once we go through a few more slides. So just bear that in mind, that the inspiration is a major regulator of the CSF flow. Next slide, please, ma'am. So the lymphatic system, for a long time, nobody knew how we have lymphatic system everywhere else in the body, but this lymphatic system in the brain is a recent discovery, I have to say. And a lot of people didn't know how we get rid of the trash from the brain. There are lots of things that are inflammatory particles within the brain that are accumulated over a period of time, and people didn't know how we get rid of them. And it was thought to be that it's connected somehow to the general lymphatic system in the cervical nodes, but how it actually drains was not very clear. So it was only in 2012 when there was a paper released with a lot of research behind it, that there is actually a lymphatic system within the brain itself, and that's very much linked to the glial cells in the brain, and that's why it is called as a glymphatic system. And this discovery has made a huge impact in how we understand how we get rid of these neuroinflammatory cells in the brain. And that's important to know because lots of cells that are produced, including the beta amyloid, for example, and the neurodegenerative conditions that we know about is probably because of these neuroinflammation. And getting rid of these cells are very important to have a good brain aging. So this is called as the glymphatic system, and that's very much linked to the CSF flow and the drainage of these particles into this lymphatic system. And it's thought to run along the dura mater. When we do the brain imaging with contrast enhanced scans and fMRI, etc., we have a good outline of the cerebral venous sinuses, and it's these lymphatic systems that are thought to line these venous sinuses along, and it's connected to the cervical lymphatic system. Next slide, please. So this lymphatic system, what we call a glymphatic system, is influenced by a lot of things. With aging, it has an impact on the glymphatic system, and we need to ensure that the glymphatic system works well. And the more and more research has been ongoing on how what impacts the glymphatic system. And in addition to the nutrition and other things that we talk about, the circadian rhythm and misalignment has a significant impact. And it is a documented research out there that the functioning of the glymphatic system is at its best when we are asleep. So if we have a good sleep pattern, good circadian rhythm, that influences the good functioning of the glymphatic system, and that is a major player in getting rid of all the neuroinflammation and aggregates in the brain. And again, that will influence that we have a healthy aging and probably reduce our risk of conditions such as dementia. So this just is a picture showing how complex our neuroglial cells are and how these degenerating neurons and beta amyloid plaques are within the brain. And the sleep that we get is probably the best time when we get rid of these neuroinflammatory plaques, and probably help us have a clean brain, as you could say. Next slide, please. So this is just a schematic picture to show that when we are awake, we have a reduced interstitial space and restricted CSF flow, and metabolites accumulate. Whereas when we are asleep, we do know that the interstitial fluid and interstitial space increase significantly when we are asleep, and the CSF flow is better, the dynamics are better, and then there is an effective clearance of all these metabolites. And to tie up where I started from, the CSF flow is influenced by our breathing pattern, and the glymphatic system is influenced by several other things, including the sleep mainly. Next slide, please. So just to, in the interest of time, although it's not a direct link with AUM, but I think AUM chanting is part of the meditation, and meditation helps us to regulate our cortisol system, cortisol regulation, and then that again, it has an influence on our cardiovascular system. And we do know that when we meditate, we regulate our breathing pattern and our heart rate is stabilized. And then if we are in a rested state, we sleep better, and then that will influence our glymphatic system. And there is a lot of research out there that stress has a negative impact on the glymphatic system. And this is backed by Ayurvedic medicine. We've always thought about if negative emotions have an impact on our brain functioning. And there's a established research that sleep is the brain housekeeper. So to just summarize, the healthy glymphatic is released reduced inflammation and better drainage of superfluous materials in the brain, and we lead to a better health, which leads to a better health, better and healthy aging. So that's my take on how the CSF dynamics might help with our better, understanding Om chanting and meditation in general. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shalini. That was almost felt like a CPD, understanding something new about lymphatics. I'm really, really grateful for you introducing this concept and how you can link it up with all that we are trying to achieve with Om meditation. And we all knew that it's going to be health, it's going to be good for the brain, but how do you go and objectively try and prove this? I think from today's session, one thing that I have learned is that that you all very nicely summarize the current data that is out there and what is the future direction of research likely to be, and where are all those new papers that are going to look at from Om's perspective. But I think the bigger agenda here from me personally is, we are doing these scriptural studies not because we got nothing else to do on a Sunday evening, but actually it makes a lot of sense with regards to what we are trying to achieve in our own lives and what we are trying to achieve with our bodies that we have at our disposal. So I think the whole session that we've had this afternoon has sort of come in. It's all fitted very well with regards to what we want to achieve. And I think Shalini finished it off with where is the field heading towards at this point of time. So hopefully there'll be a lot of exciting research over the next 5 to 10 years. So Shalini, thanks once again.
Thank you,
Madhu. So what I was going to do is
Madhu, I'm not sure. We got just 30 seconds. I'll just play the Mani Padmeham from the Buddhist meditation quickly. Just 30 seconds.
Yeah. Let me just stop my share and then you can share your stuff and then we'll come back to Q&A. Yeah?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Can I also request the speakers to come on to the video, please?
Can I put mine then now, Madhu?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
That's all. That was a Buddhist meditation thing, which starts with Om Mani Padmeham. So, it was also very much I did play only for a few seconds, but it was still very much soothing and, it was very much very good to listen actually. So, yeah, Madhu, you take over.
Yes. So Sudarshan, on a lighter note, I remember some few years ago, I saw a program where there's this Buddhist monk in Tibet. So this guy is doing this Om meditation and he actually levitates and he actually floats up in the air. I actually saw it. This is a guy about, this was a program about a guy who looks at fantastic magic across the world. And then he goes to this Tibetan monk and he is reciting Om and he's levitating. And there is no way in which he could explain how that happened. So it's all amazing stuff, but I'm sure there is lots of things that we do not know about. But anyway, thanks very much, Sudarshan. Next week, I think it will be really, really interesting because we have done the scriptures, we have understood so much of science, and I'm really looking forward to next week when Sundar Iyer from Ohio in the US, he's going to be doing a session on how to actually recite Om, and hopefully all of us will incorporate into practice afterwards. So anyway, Sudarshan, thanks a lot for that. So we go to Q&A, and we got all the four speakers here. Have we got all the speakers here? Yes. So I want to go through certain comments that have come through in the chat platform. So there is a question from Harish. Harish, do you want to come on? I have to admit, I haven't quite captured what you're trying to get at with that question, but do you want to just come online and ask the panel that question, please?
Hi, Badruji. And first of all, thanks to all the presenters. I think it was a very enlightening session, no doubt. Which question in particular is unclear? I know I had sent
So you said in the study group, is the bhakti or connectedness of the individual play a part in how the brain neurons react?
Correct. So there was a, so in the study, I think this was in the talk that Mohanji presented, there was this analysis of the study group, that how the neuron functioned based on whether they were chanting or not chanting. My one question is, was it just a neutral, chanting versus non-chanting, or chanting, with certain connectedness, right? So because I was trying to see if there was that element added into the study group. It was likely not, given that it was a scientific study group, but I just wanted to check if there
No,
was any.
yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah.
So it was control against the control. So a religious chanting leads to a different pattern of brain network as against to a non-religious chant. And also when Devalji was covering her review of literature, even like Om against Tom or Com or Sa, different sounds. This study has been repeated many times, and there is a difference. What I would like to extend from there is from bhakti or repeated chanting over a period of time is that these brain networks have a habit of staying the way they are, and we have neurology experts so they can talk about that. If we continuously do something, those synapses will become denser, deeper, and stay there longer. So if you have to what we call recall memory, right, that will be stronger for that. So a typical bhakti and repeated frame of chanting will lead to a state of mind where you are able to access your consciousness better, so to say.
I got it. Yeah.
Thank you, Harish, and thank you, Mohanji. So there was one question around quantum entanglement that Harish again had, but he was suggesting that there are lots of talks from the Stanford group. Harish is in New Jersey, so he's not too far away from Stanford. So yes, Harish, please do share those talks. I presume they are all in the YouTube platform or some audio files that we might be able to access. So on that note, that the quantum entanglement, I had a question for all of you, all four of you. So I'll start off with Mohan, directed primarily at Mohan, I have to admit. So the quantum entanglement, Mohan, is about how that quantum entanglement somehow leads to consciousness. Yeah. So now there are two problems there, assuming quantum entanglement as some kind of a sum total of quantum entanglement actually leads to consciousness. What are the two problems? Number one is somebody who is conscious needs to observe this experiment. That is one problem I have. The other problem is the quantum stuff is a random thingy, isn't it? It is not a regulated process, as it were. Now, if consciousness evolves from that, then how would you account for self-initiated activity? How will that quantum entanglement will actually lead to not only perception of the external world and understanding I have received the knowledge, and also to have that self-directed activity. And at the same time, you need another conscious person to be seeing all these experiments and come up with your hypothesis. So how do you kind of square that circle? What is the view there at this point?
Well, thank you. That's a very insightful question. There are two ways of looking at it. One thing we talked about in the previous, I don't remember which one, but about absolute time and relative time. And you were expounding on that in a different context, but it's also similar. Here we are talking about, in some sense, I would say there is a different consciousness that we are talking about, which can observe other consciousness. But what we are probing here is a very basal level of consciousness. As I said, like we have no clue about Turiya, right? So this consciousness that this through anesthesia we are able to probe is the very first level of consciousness. All we are doing is that we'll be able to cut off something, after which we'll be able to operate on people without any problem, right? But that's like very surface level of consciousness. We are not really talking about deeper level. So what happens at that level of consciousness is something that quantum entanglement is able to actually explain. Interestingly, it's also able to recover some of the free will problem that you are hinting at. So where is that self-initiated, you will be able to do something. And interestingly, if you don't have quantum, actually you have a problem. Because if everything is deterministic, there is no rule for free will completely, right? If we said there is no randomness, no problem with order, A leads to B, B leads to C, then you are ruling out completely free will, right? But in quantum, what happens, and this is where this uncertainty principle comes in place, is that from Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you have opportunity if your delta t is very small. Actually, you can travel back in classical time a little bit, which is edge against absolute time where you cannot travel back. And that's why that fundamental Upanishadic concept becomes so critical for us to hold anything on quantum. So what happens in quantum world, as long as your delta t is within that range, which is allowing you to go back in classical time, you are able to take all the information. And as you already know that Google has shown this quantum computing, that quantum computing is like millions times faster than the computing that we have seen today. So it's no wonder that in the nanoseconds of quantum processing that's available there, you could process an entire encyclopedia, so to say. So you are able to do that in delta t within that time with the terahertz frequency, and come back in your normal time and know that you are exercising something on your free will and you are very comfortable with that. So it's very counterintuitive, very complex. Like, why is quantum coming and helping free will? The point is, if you don't have quantum, there is no free will for sure.
Okay, so the issue about free will is much more of a fundamental philosophical problem. We'll just park it there for now. If anybody else wants to contribute here, Deval and Nandesh, Shalini, any contributions for this this complex problem?
Saying, in regards Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and also it's about how, depending on when you look at things and what you look at, you get different views. So it's because otherwise it becomes too deterministic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think from a biological perspective, I think we are very in an evolutionary primitive stage because we don't know what is the biology of consciousness. We can't. How can we study something that you have to have? So if you look at my slides, I've sort of tried to define what is it that people are trying to study, and in inference, what is the two things that you're trying to put together and sort of conclude that A has an effect on B. So from a biological perspective, yes, we know that there is chemistry and there is electricity, but I'm not quite sure what is consciousness. I think that's why my slide states that everybody agrees that it exists, but is very difficult to define. So I think we would have to start there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree with you more, but I'm sure academics are churning in lots of grants because nobody know what it is. I'm sure that's what is going on. So Suresh is raising his hands there. Suresh, go on.
Thanks, Madhu. I mean, just to what Mohan said and Nandish added, I mean, on the answer Heisenberg's principle, just two things, that the observer also influences the observed, or the fact that the very act of measuring, the very act of trying to understand also influences the real state. So you're never able to actually quantify or define a baseline in these circumstances. So any experimental approach or anything that you want to materially probe what is essential in experience, how much of that would be credible baseline for us to draw inferences and try and map it to certain outcomes. That was the doubt that I had. And for us to, and that's not to discourage the thought that Mohan said that we should attempt a study on this. I think that's very much feasible for us to define a few things and look at it different respectively. But how do you define a baseline for such experiments? That's the question I was trying to ask the panel, if anybody had any thoughts.
Thanks, Suresh. Complex question. So maybe I could ask Mohan to take that on, and then come to Nandesh and Deval and Shalini.
Sure. So I think we'll have to give up something to probe further. As Einstein said, is that way a problem of higher order cannot be solved by lower order intelligence, right? So I think the kind of science we have pursued so far has its limitations. So some of those things, the way an experiment is framed, we have to probably accommodate some changes to probe this further. For example, we will have to explore this state of observer and observed combined together, and then see if we can make some conclusion with that combined. So far, we always kept observer and observed separate, and then tried to derive some inference on the observed. At some level, while making this presentation occurred to me is that when we are saying that these quantum coherence that is happening, that's leading to consciousness, we now very well know that when we look at solve our quantum equations, we know that none of these electrons, which we classically thought when we saw in high school picture that it's orbiting around the nucleus, it's not like that. An electron can be anywhere in the world, anywhere in the universe. It's most likely to be there at that point of time. That's the only thing we have found out. So this conscious coherence that's happening, it could be happening anywhere in the universe with any other sentient being or non-sentient being in the world. So talking about our consciousness probably itself is a not a worthwhile exercise. There is consciousness. That's probably what we can say. We cannot say this is my consciousness. So to probe that one, we will have to give up on some of our previous scientific methodology and probably tap into what our rishis did in terms of probing it, and learn from the Upanishadic experimental protocols, incorporate that in and enrich modern science to probe it. So that's only thought I can have on that.
Yeah,
Great question.
So before I bring Nandesh and Nandesh, come on, go on.
Yeah, no, I think I could just think of an example which was quoted by one of our leading biologists, David Attenborough. I know some of you might recall, so he gave an example of a anthill. So an anthill is a full-fledged, city with all the ants working in together and so on and so forth. Building fantastic anthills with air conditioning inside and surviving, thriving, and all that. But when you, the observer, as you lift the lid on that and you see it, they don't know that they are being observed. But there's something which is keeping them all going. So I don't know whether there can be some experiments which would and we are all in a similar state where we don't have, we just, just going through samsara and just going through all that. But, there's someone above, and whether the frequency, whether the way the ants are operating, if they're aware that there's someone, an observer, will that some of that change? And how? I'm just trying to think of an experiment, just based on what David Attenborough gave it as an example.
Yeah, interesting, Nandesh. So one contribution I was going to make related to what Mohan said is, Mohan, there is something called Occam's razor in philosophy. I'm sure you've heard of Occam's razor.
Yes. All
things being equal, the simplest explanation usually tends to be the right answer. Yeah.
Right.
So this is what our rishis said: Kalpana Laghava versus Kalpana Gaurava. So in the Rishi's intuition and philosophical discussion, Kalpana Laghava always is a stronger argument compared to Kalpana Gaurava because there are fewer assumptions. So if you take that angle, why make so much fuss about, this is just a challenge here, why make so much fuss about quantum entanglement, quantum this and quantum that? Our Rishis have gone inwards. They've seen this in deep contemplation and they've said, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Soul has consciousness, nothing to do with quantum dots or quantum entanglements or stuff like that. So why don't we just accept the easiest explanation and then get on with our lives? The reason why I say that is, how will you objectively measure experientiality, for example? You cannot, how can you experientiality, how can you measure? You can't measure that as well, because consciousness is an experientiality, isn't it? So even that you can't measure. So why can't we accept in this audience that our Upanishads and our Rishis, they got this right all along, and they said, guys, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Non-living things don't have consciousness. So that was what my next question was. If you're going to be talking about quantum this and quantum that, my next question was, does a stone have consciousness? Because that has also got atoms, that has also got electrons, they are also vibrating, and from Nandesh's argument, they also have this, Heisenberg's whatever principle. So why are they not conscious? Why are only human bodies that still have a heart beating are conscious? So two questions, just to put it on the audience. And after that, I've got Paresh who asked a question, so I'll come to that.
I mean,
Anybody wants to?
I think,
would it be that even they also have some level of consciousness, but a very low level of consciousness?
I don't know.
well, I think I think there is a generic acceptance of what consciousness is, isn't it? So there is matter and, there are living beings. And I think biologically that is a generally accepted principle. I think my counter to Madhu is, it is in the nature of human intelligence and psychology to be curious about things. And it doesn't matter which principle base, whether it be physics or chemistry or biology or electricity, we try to study. It is in the nature of human beings to study it. So the lowest principle, we can accept that there is consciousness, but it will still, because we don't know exactly what it is, it will make us want to study it.
I mean, one way of looking at it is as follows, that Rishis didn't just experience it for themselves, they have also laid out a path that if we follow that, we can also experience, right? So it's not just hypothetical that they have said and we have to trust their word. Of course, we have to trust their word because that's, in many ways, there is no other way, right? Even when a LIGO experiment is converting that they found gravity waves, you read it in literature somewhere and you are trusting somebody's word. You are not doing that experiment. So it's saying that you can't trust somebody's word means that an entire edifice of even current science will get down. So to that extent, when these Mahapurushas say something, I don't see any particular reason to doubt that. I just accept it that what they said is right. But they have gone beyond that, just out of karuna or compassion for us. They have also given us a path that you will follow this thing and you will also be able to experience it. So all of us can have our own experiential reality and thereby confirm that that method is valid. So that is as far as scientific experimentation we can do with that. However, we are pursuing the other dimensions, Madhuji, I think, because there is something that tells us that we need to convert knowledge to technology, science to technology. If it was just science, probably we could stay with that. But we have in last 300, 400 years, we are driven by technology, right? You have not learned something till you have actually figured a way out to use it in certain way, in a material way. So the idea here is to understand consciousness. I mean, medical experts are here, so I won't speak too much. I have a scant knowledge of it. But just also understanding when is somebody in coma, when do you pull the plug, when you can recover, not recover. There are ethical questions and dilemma that's there. Somebody else is deciding on somebody else's life. So there is that ethics conundrum. So if we can actually find correlates of consciousness and through some protocol demonstrate that, okay, this is clearly not conscious versus conscious. On the stone, is a stone conscious or not? I mean, in Bhagavad Gita, I mean, you know better than I, that Sukshma is all pervading, right? You say Vishwa, it's all pervading. So if it's pervading everything, it's pervading stone as well. And if it's pervading stone as well, then it's as good as you and I, right? So
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Point taken. So if you from a supreme's perspective, yes, the supreme consciousness is there. But
yes.
from an individual self's perspective is where I was coming from. But anyway, so we'll have to move on. I think there's a very good question that's come from Paresh Patel, who is also from pharmaceutical background. So Paresh is asking, what is the significance with the various elements of symbol and shape of Om? So I think Nandesh had some slides, I think, on this one, or I saw some slides to discuss the significance of the shape. So maybe Nandesh, do you want to take on that?
I think let's go back to the slide. I think, if I have to continue. Yeah, it shows all the different states actually, I think.
Yeah, do you want? Yeah, you can share, I think, unless Sudarshan, do you want to stop sharing, or you stop sharing?
I'm not sharing anything, boss.
Yeah, okay, sir. Thanks. Okay, so whilst you are trying to get that one, there is a very positive comment from Pragnesh to all the panel members. One of the most intellectually stimulating and spiritually enriching sessions. So he's very appreciative. Thanks, Pragnesh. And Pragnesh is from Scotland. He's from Aberdeen, I think. So I hope it's sunny in Aberdeen at this point of time.
Madhu, I have a point to make.
Yes, Sudarshan, come on. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
I met one of my friend. In fact, I called him for this meeting. He's like done MSc in yoga and he's quite into meditation very much every day. But he told me an interesting thing. He said like we all have a Om that is sort of vibrating inside our body all the time. So if he says like, what he says is if you can start meditating in a quiet place, particularly in the early morning when there's less distraction, you should be able to hear it in a month's time if you do the meditation regularly. So like, basically you are listening to the Om that is coming automatically, like, it's there 24/7. But normally you can't hear it because of the outside noise and, you're not focused. But he says it is there, and he says anybody can do that. Like if you are in a focused meditation, even for within 4 weeks, you can start hearing it. So and he has done it as well. So that's what he told me. So it's something very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, that's very fascinating. Thanks for the Sudarshan. So Pragnesh has got a comment to make. Yeah, Pragnesh, you can.
Thank you
please
very
come on.
much. I'm very delighted to be part of this team. I have one or two very brief comment. The one thing which I wanted to quote Bhagavad Gita is already quoted by Mohanji about the stone and consciousness. Other thing I wanted to quote about studies of Professor Ramchandran, who is a neurologist practicing in San Diego, on mirror neurons. There was a question about chanting alone or chanting in a group or listening passively or actively chanting. And I think that the question about that can be addressed on his theory about mirror neurons. But otherwise,
Okay,
thoroughly enjoyed. And I regularly listen to Gayatri Mantra, which is slightly different than just Om, but it definitely helps connecting memory and improving functions due to hippocampal connections and amygdala, which we already heard from Shalini ji. So thank you. I am thoroughly enjoying.
Thank you, Pragnesh ji. So mirror neurons, anybody wants to pick up that point and elaborate for benefit of some of us who have very little knowledge on mirror neurons, including myself, please.
I did find a paper on it, but I think in the interest of time, I didn't explore that.
Yeah, I can briefly talk about that. So V. Ramchandran is, of course, he is called the Columbus of brain. So he has explored brain to its depth. So this famous experiment that he did is that these soldiers who had their arms amputated, right? And they came back complaining about actually having pain in that arm which is amputated. So it's like a phantom pain, right? The arm doesn't exist, but the pain in the arm exists. And the experiment that he did, he put a mirror in between, and then you look at this arm, and he made them do some action on this, and he actually got that treated. So in their mind now, when they are moving this arm and looking at it in the mirror, they are actually moving the other arm, which doesn't exist anymore. And he then started applying all the treatments on this arm, and this person gets convinced that treatment was done on the other arm. So through that, he is exploring, and the hypothesis is there are these mirror neurons existing, and fascinating research that he has.
Thank you, Mohan, for that contribution. So we got three folks who have raised their hands. Maybe Pragnesh is a historic raised hand. Yes, thank you, Pragnesh, for coming out. So we got Suresh and Ajit. Can I start off with Ajit first, please? So Ajit, do you want to come online?
Yeah, thanks, Mohan. I mean, I think it's just about the mirror technology. We've used it in chronic pain in rheumatology. So people with CRPS symptoms, so in Bath, where they used to have a complex regional pain syndrome unit there. So they used to work on this concept because as Mohan was trying to explain out, when you have the mirror in between your legs and you move your hands, so you move your right arm up and your left arm goes down. And then you get the person to look into the mirror. So in the mirror, the left arm sort of automatically goes up along with the right arm because that's what he sees in the mirror. But his left arm in reality is going down. So there's that incongruency within the brain, which somehow tends to reset these chronic pain pathways, and therefore it makes the pain bearable. So they've worked out on certain complex pain patients, and they managed to, as you say, in a small group of people, they managed to reduce the pain intensity. And there are the Necker images where you have the duck and the rabbit pictures. So you look at a picture and you might see a rabbit, or the same picture you might see it as a duck. In these people with complex regional pain syndromes, in some people they flick between these two images so rapidly that some of them just can't look at those images. They shut their eyes, or they are in absolute trauma when they look at those pictures. Whereas in some people, it doesn't flick at all. They can only see a duck, or they can only see a rabbit. They can only see one thing. So it's interesting that in people with these complex regional pain syndromes, you have these different neurons that are acting in the brain, and that seems to trigger off. So, I mean, yes, we've been involved with some studies with the mirror technology. It was interesting. And we just had a few people who did. Thanks.
Very good. Excellent. Excellent. So we got Suresh, who's raised hand, unless it was a legacy hand. Suresh.
So thanks, Madhu. No question. I was just relating from the previous discussion about where the limits of Cartesian thinking, quantum, and those. I had come across this. I was reading this book, Systems View of Life. For people who are interested, I thought I would share. It's by Fridtjof Capra, and Bananji actually in many of his lectures refers to. That's where I picked up Fridtjof Capra. I mean, it's a very interesting book. Gives a good view of. He's a systems theorist, and he actually analyzes the evolution of some of these concepts. I just thought I'll share it if anybody is interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, send it in the Sahiti group. Thank you, Suresh. Harish, do you have a question? We got another 12 minutes to go before we close the session. So maybe time for another 1 or 2 questions, and we'll close the session.
Thanks, Majuji. I did have a quick question for Shalini ji. So I know there's quite a bit of things that I've been seeing around detoxing your lymphatic systems. I mean, they talk about diets that help you with. They call it mucus forming diet that you can get rid of, and ways you can flush out the lymphatic systems. So does some of that apply to the glymphatic systems as well? I don't know if there's any research on outside of sleep, if there's any diet or other remedies to flush that out.
I think this glymphatic system research is still quite new. I think it doesn't mention specifically on glymphatic diet itself, but there is some concept about omega-3 and other things, just like normal nutritional things that we would normally take into consideration in terms of healthy living. but there is no specific things about glymphatics and specific diet that I have been made aware of. I think there is some research still ongoing about, because the concept about glymphatic itself is very new. So I think people are still researching into what actually goes into what the benefits of and what actually helps. I think the main thing that is well established is the sleep. The sleep definitely has a significant impact on the glymphatic system. Whereas everything else is probably still in the early stages in terms of research. And I just wanted to add on the previous point about what else does the glymphatic system do apart from drainage. There is some research in terms of it does do something with immune modulation as well, and also there is a role of chronic pain relief with the glymphatics. And I think it was Mohanji or somebody who touched upon the phantom limb, and that was something that came up with the glymphatics as well. There is probably something to do with the chronic pain management and mirror cells, mirror neurons and things like that. But it's all very early stages, but I think there is a lot of potential research that will probably come up in the next few years.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Nandeshji. I can see for Mohan, sleep is almost coming his way very rapidly. It must be midnight, so we'll finish off in a few minutes. So we got some positive comments from Preeti ji. Thank you very much, Preeti ji. There are a couple of very important questions from Neeta and Sushrut. Does hearing to chanting have the same effect as chanting? Sudarshan, do you want to from any views on that?
Well, I mean, I suppose chanting by yourself is much better. It's more active process than the hearing. I would probably give an analogy like it's much about eating. Like if you watch somebody eating food, you get stimulated, but it's not the same.
At least you will be on a diet, so that's a positive things there.
I think the different studies that I showed, they used different things. One was just meditating in your mind versus loud chanting, and so they have tried to look at that. And one of the speech things, which I'm not quite sure what the mechanism is, did look at how chanting affects, and it has more physiological response than just meditating on the in your mind.
So I mean, they could have similar impact, but there are practical differences. So, for example, levitation you will not be able to do just by listening to somebody else chant. You will have to do that yourself, because the idea is to channelize your energy in a certain way and create a energy field around you which lets you levitate or fly or whatever. So there are a bunch of things you could do, but that you will have to do. Somebody else's chanting won't help you do that. But beyond that, even silent meditation is helpful, because ultimately it is not about your vibration at a certain frequency that's doing the magic. It's ultimately that terahertz vibration that's happening in your microtubules that's doing it. And that's happening because you are thinking about it, not just that you are actually vibrating your body. So if we put our body in a shaker, it won't help you much. That vibration which is happening at terahertz is at a different order of magnitude that we can't even imagine, and that we can just do by thinking. So it's helpful when we listen to somebody else chant. It does trigger that, because ultimately brain has to reconfigure itself and say, okay, Om chanting is happening, right? So ultimately your brain has to rewire and access those same points, and at that moment it will be having that terahertz vibration. So it will lead to that benefit. And there was one more thing about group chanting. So group chanting will obviously have additional benefit, because if you are together, then maybe there is a parapsychological level of coherence happening. So all of it is useful. I mean, as it's I keep going back to Tulsidas. So he says, "Bhaya kubhaya anaka alasaho Ram nam mangal disidasaho." So whichever way you take Lord's name, it is useful. So it's all useful, but it may have different context.
Thank you, Mohanji. Yeah, so another one, I think meditation chanting must work. None of our Swamijis ever got dementia. That's very true. And many of our rishis also lived for hundreds of years. We hear in various scriptures. Not the primary reason probably is they were regulating their breathing. And as you know, each according to Shastras, when you are born, you have a set number of breathing that you're allocated. That is your account. You will have so many million breathing. That is your lifetime. If you have a mechanism to extend your breathing by yogic practices, by Om meditation and so on, you will prevent dementia, and at the same time you will also extend your life. So Nita and Shushrut, so yes, you can carry on doing the yoga meditation and live for hundreds of years down the road. Yeah. So
I think that's how apparently the tortoise does live for hundreds of years. Tortoise that has very low breathing rate.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, excellent. Okay. On that very useful note of longevity and dementia, it all hits home that I think this last session, over the last 2 hours, we've actually had a very interactive.
Madhu, we lost you. Madhu?
Sorry, somebody coming in on audio.
No. We lost you for a few seconds.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I was going to say,
yeah, are we chanting Om next week, or I thought we'll probably chant Om before finishing today, or we are somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Harish and you can lead the session for all of us today, and then we'll close the session. So before you do that, just wanted to thank everyone for spending this whole evening today to discuss this important topic. And next week is going to be amazing, of course. So Sudarshan and Harish, do you want to lead the Om chanting? So we'll all switch our mics on.
Well, I think only one person can do, because
Sudarshan, you lead, and then Harish will also.
Okay, yeah, I think you all need to, all of you, like you should be on mute.
No resident experts here. Yes, Sudarshan.
Okay, we'll chant Om 8 times. Yeah, it's not going to take much time. It will be less than a minute. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, done. We're done 8 times. Thank you.
Really want to thank everyone again for another excellent session. So we will meet next Sunday, which also promises to be extremely interesting. So I will plan it. We'll circulate the pamphlets again. So just spread the message, spread the word, and we got an expert joining us next Sunday. Hope to see lots of folks on this forum again. Okay. Anyway, good night and good evening. Enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you very much. Shall we give a big round of applause to everyone, please?
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you,
Thanks, Madhu. Thanks. Bye.
non-speakers did very good. Thank you.
Thank you.